In this video, I'll be bringing you my 10 tips for retro game collecting. Tip number 1, set a budget. You need to have a budget going into this, especially if you're a beginning collector. So what I mean is you want to be setting either a weekly, a monthly, a weekend, or a quarterly budget on how much you're going to be spending on retro games. You don't want to just go out and buy every game there is. And so by setting a budget, you'll be able to keep yourself under control on how much you spend each month. Tip number 2, research game values and know how to spot a fake versus a real cartridge. So by this what I mean is when you go out, you need to know what a game is worth. Whether it's searching on eBay, whether it's you're in a game store, a flea market, whatever it may be, you want to have your phone on you, be looking at Game Value Now, price charting, GameEye, whatever it may be, to make sure you're not overpaying for games. Tip number 3, buy in bulk. Especially if you're a beginning collector, you want to be buying as much at a single time as you can. So if you go on eBay, you see a large lot, let's say you're looking for a Sega Genesis, find Genesis and you find, let's say, 50 games with it. If those are 50 unique games and you don't have any of those, jump on that. That is a great start to your collection. If you are a heavy collector already and you come across that lot, and let's say you don't have half of those games, don't just pass on it. You may want to take a glance at it. There may be some games in there that you have but are worth a decent amount that you can use for trade bait. Tip number 4, know your space limits. So if you look behind me, you see I have a pretty big wall. This is actually just one of my walls for my game collection. And if you notice, I also have empty spaces in here. This is because my ultimate goal is a full US Sega set. And so that's what I'm aiming towards. And I know what the space I have is. So what I've done is when I built the when I put the shelving in and built the room, I allocated this whole wall for my Sega set. So I know what those limits are that I have. What limits do you have? You need to identify that. Whether it's using a spare bedroom, a closet, whatever it may be to store your collection, you need to know what those space limits are. If you have a small space, then maybe you should just collect loose. I have the space for all these cased games. You may not. And so loose is perfectly fine. You still get the playability of the games. Honestly, complete in box or cased like I have take up a lot more room. Yeah, they look nicer on the shelf, but they do take up a lot more room. So just know what your space limits are. Tip number 5, if you do decide to collect loose, don't just pass on complete in box games. So if you're at a flea market, you come across a Hyperstone Heist complete in box, seller wants $65 for it, you look on your phone and you say, hey, this game's really only worth $40 loose, I can get it elsewhere. Don't pass on it. You can use that box and possibly trade that for $50 worth of games. I've done it personally myself, not with Hyperstone Heist, but with some other games like, for example, Knuckles Chaotix for the 32X. I bought that game for $45 shipped on eBay about a year ago. Within a week after buying it, I was able to trade that case to another collector for about $55 worth of games. So I essentially got Knuckles Chaotix for free. Just keep that in mind. Don't just be passing on complete in box games because you're a loose collector. Tip number 6, use thrift shops, Facebook groups, and avoid eBay Buy It Now and Shop Goodwill. So what I'm saying is eBay Buy It Now is a powerful tool. However, it causes a lot of impulse buying, and that's not what you want. So a lot of sellers will list on eBay at astronomical prices, and they do that because eBay recently, within the past few years, changed their policy where they no longer charge you to list an item, they only charge you if it sells. So a seller that has, let's say, Little Samson, they can throw it up for $2,000 and let it sit for a year, and it's not costing them anything other than the space to store it. And so that's a reason why you see a lot of these items at high dollars on eBay. The best thing to do is look at buy it nows with a best offer. I actually, whenever I'm on eBay, I always filter by best offer, because those are sellers that are willing to accept lower than what it's worth. And so, or lower than what they're asking for it. And a lot of these are individuals, just trying to make some extra money. Shop Goodwill is another good tool, but a lot of the items sell for a lot more than they're worth. I still don't understand why that is. But the big thing you need to keep an eye out for is their shipping and handling fees. Their shipping and handling tend to be a lot higher because they charge you a shipping weight versus an actual weight, which is okay, except for the fact that the difference there is generally a $15 to $20 difference, which just seems crazy. Next tip I have for you guys is pick a system and define boundaries. So this is especially critical for new collectors. Pick 1 or 2 systems that you want to collect for and collect just for those. Don't go out and start collecting, for 50 different systems from the beginning. You may eventually get there, but don't do that right off the bat. You're going to end up with so many games that you don't know what to do with. So this happened to me when I first started collecting. I'd go out to the flea market, I'd just buy up everything. I'd buy Xbox games, PS2 games, PS1 games, Xbox 360, PS3. I would start buying up all these games that I knew I was never going to play and I never really had a passion for. And they just sat on the shelf and I never used them. Eventually, I actually ran out of space. And so about 6 months ago, I actually sold 600 of my disc-based games, original Xbox, PS2, PS1, etc., to a game store because I needed the space. It wasn't necessarily that I needed the money per se, but I actually needed the space. And so I went to them. They gave me partial cash and store credit for these 600 games. They were a new store, so I helped them get off the ground with inventory, and they helped me by taking them off my hands. At that time, I was in the middle of a move. Everything ended up working out for me. I was able to get rid of them, but I actually sat on them I've probably been trying to get rid of them for months before I went there. So the moral of the story here is make sure you are defining what those boundaries are from the beginning. So once you get to a certain point, then you may want to branch off into another system. But in the beginning, you want to refine yourself to what that system is. Tip number 8, social network. I cannot express how important this is. I'm not talking just Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. What I'm really talking about here is people close to you. So friends, family, co-workers. Make sure they all know that you collect and have a passion for retro video games, because that will help you go a long way. I've had numerous dealings with some of my coworkers where they've come up to me just randomly and said, "Hey, I was at my parents' house over the weekend. I know you collect retro games. I found a box of my old games in their basement. Would you be interested in these?" And I'd say, "Yeah, bring them in tomorrow." They bring them in. I'd make them an offer, and I actually haven't had a single offer refused. And so that is great. It's a great way to have them looking out for you, right? So if they know, the more people that know you're collecting retro games, the more of a networking you have and opportunity to get games that people may not even realize they still have or are worth anything. Number 9, set periodic goals. This is very important to have a goal so that you can track your progress, right? You want trackable goals. So, for instance, this year I set a goal. I wanted to reach 400 Sega Genesis games. I did that a couple months ago. I hit that goal. And so I'm in a cool-off period now through the remainder of the year where I'm working on my game room, I'm working on a few other projects around the house that I'm trying to get through before winter sets in. And then I'll be ramping back up in, January, where I'll start collecting again. My goal for next year is 425 games to hit that mark. Not to get 425 games, that'd be crazy. So it's just something, you want to set those goals and make sure they're achievable and trackable. And the final tip I have for you guys is remember that this is a hobby, not a business. If you're trying to get into retro game collecting because you think it's an investment, a financial investment, then I strongly recommend you turn the other way. Because this is not the right way to invest. I'm not a financial analyst. I'm not going to give you financial advice, but video game collecting would be very risky as an investment, and in the end it's a hobby. It's entertainment, right? So just keep that in mind, that you need to be treating this as a hobby and not as a financial gain. I know a few people that have started game stores, and they've told me, the first year or two, you're going to lose money. And so this is not something that you just want to jump into. If you want to start a game business, start a game business. But don't start collecting because you want to run your own game business or you want to make a quick buck. Right? Video game collecting has its ups, it has its downs. Right? So just keep that in mind, that in the end, this should be treated as a hobby and not as a financial gain. And so those are my 10 tips for collecting retro video games. If you like this content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Don't forget to follow me. I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Those links are in the description. And I also have a Patreon. It's relatively new. So all of the contributions from that Patreon go to the funding for this channel. So if you like the content I'm producing and would like even more content, please consider checking that out as well. Thank you.